My name is Lucinda. I've spent the last 12 years leading rescue missions for the U.S. Coast Guard, mostly in storms that would make most people freeze. I come from a Southern family where elegance is inherited, success is curated, and daughters are expected to shine in ways that photograph well. My younger sister Clara fits that mold perfectly. I never did. While she collected awards and wedding registries, I collected frostbite, radio calls, and the names of people I pulled from the lake. At home, I was the quiet one, the odd one, the one they told not to mention what I really did for a living. And when I showed up to her engagement party in Savannah, they introduced me as just Rachel, nothing more. But when her Navy fiancé snapped to attention and saluted me in front of the whole room, well, that was the moment everything cracked wide open. Has someone ever seen something in you right when everyone else tried to tear you down? If this resonates, your story matters. Share the moment someone stood up for you, even when it wasn't easy. The storm had ended hours ago, but my body hadn't gotten the message. Every joint pulsed with leftover adrenaline. My boots thudded against the metal deck of the cutter as I stepped off, the lake behind me still wild with chop and gray light. I didn't even change out of my uniform before collapsing onto the threadbare couch in my apartment. The heater wheezed against the cold. My walls were bare. No photos, no distractions, just a duty roster pinned beside the fridge, and a half-empty mug from Sector Detroit's command office. I had 27 lives to my name after last night. Not that anyone here would ask. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Mom, Clara got engaged. Engagement party in Savannah. Big crowd. Dress nice. Don't wear your uniform. It's Clara's moment. Mom again. Please don't bring up the Coast Guard stuff. You know how people talk. Clara. Hey, would love you to come. Can you just keep things low-key? I want Nathan to feel comfortable. Nathan, the SEAL, the Southern gentleman, the war hero with perfect posture and family connections. Of course he was uncomfortable with women like me. I let the phone dim. I had no energy for this dance, no interest in being the family disappointment dressed up in neutral tones. I took a long shower and changed into sweats, sat at the edge of the bed and stared at the window where Detroit snow dusted the sill like powdered sugar. In the distance, sirens howled, a different kind of storm brewing. Then my phone lit up again. Ike Morales. Heads up, something weird with your storm vector report. They're reviewing it. Don't freak yet, but keep your phone close. I stared at the screen, then typed one word. Copy. Ike had been with me since the academy. Same class, same stubborn streak. If he was flagging something, it wasn't nothing. Still, I didn't reply again. I just sat in the dark, wrapping my arms around myself while the memory of that night on the lake played in reverse. The broken radio, the panicked voices, the decision to change course vector 298, not 315. My call, my command. I had done the math in seconds. I had trusted my gut, and 27 people had walked away breathing. But now the paperwork might say otherwise. I packed slowly. A black carry-on, neutral dresses, nothing sharp. I folded my uniform and left it in the closet. As I zipped the bag, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Exhausted, salt-chapped skin, hair tied in a no-nonsense braid. Try not to scare them, I muttered, then laughed once, bitterly. Before I left for the airport, I double-checked the duty roster. I had 3 days before I needed to report back. 3 days to play the role, nod politely, and disappear again. Just 3 days. As the cab pulled away from my apartment, the sky spit flakes of sleet across the windshield. I didn't look back. They don't want me to be seen. Fine. But this time, I won't let them unsee me. Savannah met me with air too sweet to trust, the kind that clings to your skin like syrup and smells of magnolia and river water. The sun was already too bright when I stepped off the plane. Everything about the city felt delicate and curated, from the brick-lined walkways to the wrought iron balconies draped in moss. It looked like a postcard, but I wasn't here for the view. I dragged my carry-on past honeymooners and sorority reunions, weaving through the terminal with my head down. It had been less than 10 hours since I stepped off a cutter in Detroit. Now I was supposed to smile, play nice, and not mention the storm I still felt in my bones. Outside, the rideshare driver complimented the weather. I nodded, said nothing. My dress clung uncomfortably to my skin in the back seat. As we wound through Savannah's historic district, I saw gas lamps flickering in daylight and wedding tents already going up on manicured lawns. My mother's house sat at the edge of an old square, tall and proud with white columns that never known a speck of dust. She had it professionally staged last year just in case the magazines called. They never did, but she kept the foyer arranged like a showroom anyway. She opened the door before I could knock. "Rachel," she said. Her tone clipped. "You're early." She air-kissed my cheek but didn't meet my eyes. Inside, the air smelled of lavender polish and something roasting in the oven. The table was set for 12, even though tonight's dinner was only for the family. Clara appeared on the staircase, barefoot, glowing, her blonde hair in one of those loose waves that look accidental but probably took an hour to achieve. "Rach," she said, rushing to hug me. Her arms barely touched my shoulders. "You look so clean." I bit back a laugh. "Thanks. I shower sometimes." She smiled like she didn't hear the edge in my voice. We sat in the sunroom. Clara poured tea while Mom added lemon slices with surgical precision. "So Nathan's arriving tomorrow," Clara said. "He's really excited to meet you." I raised my eyebrow. "You sure? Didn't you say he had thoughts about the Coast Guard?" Clara's face tightened for half a second. "He just had a friend who didn't take it seriously. It made an impression. His Navy standards are different. You know how it is." I nodded slowly. I knew exactly how it is. Mom reached across the table to pat my hand, her fingers cold. "Rachel, honey, you don't have to feel like you have to prove anything. Just relax. Blend in." "This weekend is about Clara," Clara added. "And it would mean a lot to me if you didn't go into all the technical stuff. You know, storms and rescues. It can be a lot for people." "Right?" "Right," I said, sipping my tea. Wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable with real life. Neither of them responded. After dinner, I was shown to the guest room, bottom floor, near the laundry. It had been redecorated since the last time I visited. Internal reviews heating up. They're accelerating the inquiry, possible command scrutiny. I stared at the message, my fingers cold despite the Savannah heat. What changed? "New guy at JAG wants to make an example. Vector calls under review. You okay?" "I'm fine." It was a lie. I turned off the lamp. Moonlight cut across the floor like a blade. Upstairs, laughter echoed. Clara's voice, Mom, someone on speakerphone. I lay back and stared at the ceiling fan spinning too slowly. My uniform stayed zipped in my bag. My name, rank, and everything I'd fought for folded and hidden, just how they liked it. My phone buzzed again. "Thanks for being here. Seriously, just don't let the Coast Guard stuff overshadow anything, okay? It's a celebration." I didn't answer. I got up and stood at the window, watching Spanish moss sway in the breeze like something half asleep. This whole city was dressed in politeness. But underneath, I could already feel the rot. They gave me a room in the shadows. Good. Let's see what happens when lightning strikes there. The house was already humming the next evening. Soft jazz floated through the open windows, mixing with the scents of river water and gardenias. Clara's engagement party was being staged like a Southern bridal magazine come to life. Twinkle lights, white linen, crystal glassware that probably had names. I stood on the front steps, tugging at the waistline of the one simple navy dress I owned. No makeup, no jewelry, no shine. I wasn't here to compete. I was here because I had been asked, no, instructed, to smile, to blend, and to disappear. Inside, everything glittered. People moved in practice arcs, laughing at the right volume, smiling with the right tilt. I passed trays of champagne and clusters of relatives I hadn't seen in years. No one noticed me. Eventually, my mother waved me over. She was standing with a few distant cousins and one woman I vaguely remembered from Clara's college sorority. "This is Rachel," Mom said, gesturing with the practiced flick of her hand. "My older daughter. She does some work on the water up north." There was a pause, then polite smiles. "Like at the docks?" the sorority woman asked. "That must be interesting. Is it just paperwork or do you actually get wet?" Before I could speak, Mom chimed in. "She's taken a different path than Clara, but she's doing just fine." Fine. That word again. The placeholder for things people don't understand. One of the men beside her chuckled. "Sounds like hard labor. Bet you could teach us a thing or two about hauling shrimp." The laughter was soft, but sharp around the edges. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd been trained to endure worse, with a smile and a straight back. But someone was watching me. Across the room, a man in navy dress blue stood quietly, his posture crisp. Not Nathan, older. Rank on his collar I recognized instantly, retired admiral. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied me, not with condescension, but with curiosity, like he was trying to place a face he should remember. I turned away just as Clara glided into the room, glowing like always. Hair swept up, pearl earrings, a dress that whispered with every step. She hugged me lightly, then leaned in close. "Nathan is about to come in. Just please don't bring up anything too intense, okay? Like your job." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just keep it light." I nodded. The room shifted as Nathan Hale entered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of clean confidence you get from being praised since birth. Navy SEAL, Clara's golden match. He made the rounds effortlessly, smiling, handshaking, charming. When he got to me, his eyes flicked to my dress, then back to my face. "Clara's sister," he said, offering his hand. "Great to meet you. You're the one who works up north." "Sector Detroit," I replied. "Ah, the guard. I worked with your folks on a joint op once. Let's just say it didn't go smoothly." People around us chuckled. He started into a story. Something about ice flows, mistiming, near disaster. A polished antidote. Everyone was smiling until he got one detail wrong. He said the vector shirt goes 315 degrees. I didn't mean to correct him. It just came out. It was 298. The drift was westward. 315 would have driven them straight into pack ice. The room quieted a fraction. Nathan blinked, his smile flickering. "That's oddly specific," he said. "You sound like you were there." "I was," I said simply. "I was command on that call." It was like a pin dropped in a ballroom. Nathan straightened. His expression changed almost imperceptibly from amused to alert. "Captain Rachel Quinn?" he asked carefully. Heads turned, conversation dulled. I nodded. The silence that followed was the kind that only exists in rooms where people have built their entire view of you out of shadows. And now the lights are on. Then Nathan snapped to attention. His heels clicked together. His hand rose to his brow in a crisp, trained salute. Everything stopped. A woman near the bar gasped. A glass slipped and shattered. My mother's face froze. Clara stood with her mouth parted, like someone had pulled the air out of her lungs. Nathan lowered his hand slowly. We studied Great Lakes rescue at Coronado. Your radio calls are in our simulation models. I didn't know you were... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Across the room, the retired admiral stepped forward. His voice was low, steady. Captain Quinn, it's an honor. Someone nearby whispered my name into their phone. A second later, I heard, she saved 27 people. The laughter from earlier curled into tight throats and awkward glances. I saw people stand straighter, saw hands retract. Nathan looked at me again, not like Clara's sister, but like a storm. He opened his mouth, hesitated, then said, I'm sorry for underestimating you. I smiled, small, steady. I'm used to it. The moment his hand hit his brow, the truth hit the room like a siren in dead silence. The room didn't recover. Not really. Conversations resumed, but the rhythm was broken. The chandelier still glowed, the jazz quartet kept playing, and champagne still fizzed in crystal flutes. But the tone had shifted. I felt it like weather. People who had laughed quietly now nodded politely. The same guests who had dismissed me an hour ago suddenly had questions, respectful ones. Some even reverent. They wanted to hear about the storm, the rescue, the decision. I gave them what they wanted. Calm, vague answers. A nod here and a quiet yes, I was there. But I didn't elaborate. I wasn't there to perform. Clara stood near the back of the ballroom, her face unreadable, her hand still clutching her glass like it might shatter under pressure. Nathan lingered near her, clearly rattled and not entirely sure where he now stood in the hierarchy of the evening. Mom was another story. She floated between groups, attempting to reclaim her narrative, inserting phrases like, we're very proud, and she never brags, you know, with the tone of someone trying to rewrite a story mid-sentence. But the damage was done. The old version of me she'd sold for decades had just been publicly incinerated. A woman in a seafoam dress approached, wringing her hands. Captain, I'm sorry, earlier, I didn't realize. I didn't mean anything by it. I stopped her with a smile. It's fine. It wasn't, but she didn't need to carry the guilt. I was used to it. Mason, the admiral, found me by the patio doors. He had a quiet strength about him, the kind that didn't need to dominate a room to control it. I read your mission logs 2 years ago, he said. Didn't expect to meet the woman behind them in a place like this. Neither did I said. He looked around the room. They've built a version of you that can't survive a single real detail. Now they're scrambling to catch up. That's not my problem. No, he said, but it's about to become theirs. He gave a small nod of respect and disappeared into the crowd. I stepped outside, needing air. The night had cooled slightly. The river shimmered in the distance under the moonlight. I leaned against the railing and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. My phone buzzed. Ike Morales. Rachel, you need to call me. It's serious. I called immediately. Ike answered on the first ring, his voice low and urgent. They've moved up the review board. You need to be in Detroit tomorrow morning. My stomach dropped. Tomorrow? I thought I had 3 days. They're pushing hard. JAG's involved. Someone's questioning your vector call. I don't like it. I closed my eyes. You said the logs were solid. They are, he said. But politics makes truth optional. I felt the ground tilt under me, not because I was guilty, but because I knew how fast a narrative could turn, especially in rooms I wasn't invited to. I'll be there, I said. After we hung up, I stayed outside, letting the wind cool the heat rising in my chest. When I returned inside, the crowd shifted again. I was no longer just interesting. I was centered. The attention was suffocating. Guests clung to me now, clumsy with praise. A group of older men asked if I'd consider speaking at their leadership forum. A younger couple asked for a selfie. Someone even whispered I should run for office. Clara saw it all from across the room, her posture perfect, her smile brittle. Eventually, she pulled Nathan aside. I watched their silhouettes through the French doors. Clara was talking fast, her hands sharp in the air. Nathan looked toward me once. I looked away. Mom approached me with a glass of white wine. "You didn't have to humiliate your sister," she said quietly. I turned toward her, my voice even. "I didn't. I corrected a number. He's the one who saluted." She blinked, thrown off by my calm. "You know," she added, "you never told me you were a captain." I laughed once, sharp and tired. "I told you, you just never listened." She flinched. Before she could answer, my phone buzzed again. "Ike, briefing at 0500, report directly. And Rachel, bring everything. Someone wants your head." I closed the message. I felt the weight of everything crash down at once. The moment of recognition, the unraveling praise, the cold reality waiting for me back in Detroit. I walked toward Clara. She saw me coming and set her drink down too fast. "You're leaving?" "Yes," I said. "Tonight." Her mouth twisted. "Of course you are. Can't even stay one night for your own sister." I stared at her. "This isn't about work." "No," she snapped, "because it always is with you." "No," I said more quietly. "This is about truth." And that's when I turned and walked out. Let them toast to who they thought I was. I had a storm of my own to face. The Savannah sky was a deep violet when I left, heavy with humidity and something unspoken. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. No need. The silence at that party had said more than words ever could. I didn't change out of the dress, just grabbed my bag, got in the rental, and pointed it north. The GPS said 15 hours to Detroit. I figured I could make it in 12. The road stretched out ahead of me, empty, blinking, anonymous. Somewhere in the Carolinas, the first wave of exhaustion hit me, but I ignored it. The hum of the tires, the thrum in my bones from the lake storm, the sound of my sister's voice ringing in my head. Can't even stay one night for your own sister. They all formed a white noise I could push through. By the time I hit Ohio, the sky had turned a dull gray, the sun still hiding below the horizon. I pulled into a gas station, washed my face in the bathroom sink, and changed into my uniform in the stall. The fabric was still damp with lake air. I looked at myself in the mirror under flickering fluorescent lights. Creased collar, bloodshot eyes, jaw set tight. No lipstick, no soft lighting, no performance. Just duty. I walked into the briefing room at Sector Detroit 15 minutes early. The lights were already on, bright and clinical. Around the table sat 3 senior officers, a JAG representative, and 2 investigators. Ike stood near the wall, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He nodded at me, but didn't smile. They told me to sit. I did. The JAG officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Lieutenant Harper, led the meeting. "Captain Quinn, this review concerns the rescue operation on Lake Superior. Vector Decision 298. There's a concern that the directional shift may have increased risk to vessel integrity." I nodded once. "Understood." She gestured. "Proceed." I opened my laptop, pulled up radar imaging, satellite drift data, storm pressure maps.
every piece I had documented from that night. The original plan was Vector 315, standard, by the book, but the ice drift was erratic westward and pushing harder than forecasted. At 2110.4, I observed a shift that put us on a collision course. Vector 298 gave us a narrower window, but clear water.
It had been buried. Harper turned to him. By whom? Still under review, he replied. But it wasn't her. The junior investigator shifted, suddenly pale. I looked around the room at the men and women who'd spent years reading my reports, relying on my judgment in moments where seconds cost lives. I held their gaze. This wasn't a gamble, I said. This was command. Another silence followed, different this time, contemplative, weighted. Harper finally spoke. We'll revise the report to reflect your account and the evidence. No disciplinary action, no misconduct found. I didn't exhale, but something loosened in my ribs. Commander Dorsey nodded once. You acted within full authority and protocol, and you saved lives, Captain. Let the record show that. He stood and extended his hand. I shook it. Outside, the sun had finally broken through the cloud cover, pale but steady. I stepped into the parking lot, my boots crunching on salt-stained asphalt. The lake wind cut across my cheeks, cold and sharp. I checked my phone. No messages from Clara, no follow-up from Mom, just one text from Ike. Told you the storm wouldn't break you. I smiled, small and exhausted. Then I caught my reflection in the window, the silver bars on my shoulders catching the morning light like armor. They tried to bury me in protocol. Turns out, I was the map. A week after the investigation cleared, I drove back to Savannah, not for closure, not for apology, but to draw a line where one had never existed. It was early evening when I turned onto the familiar oak-lined street. Spanish moss hung low like old secrets. The house looked the same. White columns, perfect shutters, not a leaf out of place. I sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. I expected no welcome. Mom was in the kitchen slicing zucchini exactly as she had 100 times when I was a kid. When she looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, something flickered across her face. Recognition, but something heavier too. You came back, she said. I'm not staying long. She nodded and set the knife down, wiping her hands on a towel with too much care. Clara's not home. She's out doing last-minute things for the wedding. I didn't ask what, I didn't ask where. I just sat across from my mother at the same scarred table where I'd once failed algebra and learned to braid rope knots. She sat too, folding her hands, unsure where to place them. I wanted to say something, she began slowly, each word dragging. I think I believed I was protecting Clara by letting her be the star, by keeping you quiet. I stayed silent. But I wasn't protecting her, she admitted. I was protecting myself from having to explain a daughter I didn't understand. It landed harder than anything she intended, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. I'm not angry, I said. I just won't shrink anymore to keep things peaceful. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. Sandra Quinn didn't cry. She just nodded and looked away, like the truth was a beam of light she couldn't quite face. We sat that way for a while. No raised voices, no accusations, just the low hum of something being rebuilt. Not repaired, but rebuilt, from new materials. I left that night without hugging her, but I didn't slam the door either. 2 days later, Clara got married by the lake just outside town. Morning light hit the water just right, like it was blessing her. The whole scene looked like a movie set.
I wore a slate blue dress and stayed in the second row. I didn't want the front. After the ceremony, while people gathered for photos and cake, Clara found me at the edge of the dock. She didn't speak for a moment, just stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes on the water. "I saw the news," she finally said. "About the review? About everything?" I nodded. "It's done." She turned to me. "You could have made it about you that night. You didn't." "I didn't need to." She bit her lip. "I spent years thinking being impressive meant being perfect. And now I think maybe it means being brave enough to be exactly who you are." We stood in silence again, but this time it was comfortable, earned. Then, as the photographer called everyone back, Clara reached into her clutch and handed me a folded note. "Read it later." I slipped it into my pocket. That night, in the small guest room, I unfolded it. "Thank you for never leaving me, even when I didn't know how to stand beside you." I didn't cry. I just smiled. The kind that comes when something soft finally settles after being tight for too long. 2 weeks later, I was back in Detroit, back on the water, back where the air bites and the lake doesn't care what medals you've earned. It just wants to know if you'll show up when it matters. Ike stopped by the pier with coffee and his usual sarcasm. "So, you saving lives again or just dodging your sister's group texts?" I laughed. "A little bit both." We sat on a crate and watched the sunrise. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, "You ever think about why you keep showing up for people who never asked you to?" I shrugged. "Because I know what it feels like when no one does." The wind picked up. Gulls cried in the distance. Later, alone on the bridge, I looked out over the water and felt something shift. Not loud or dramatic, but sure, like a compass finally snapping back to true north. Peace didn't come from being understood. It came from no longer needing to be. And finally, I was exactly I belonged.